Hey everybody, this is Peter Bryant with the AetherCon Summer Roundtable Series. And this week we have DGS Games. We have John Cleaves. Say hi, John.
Hello there.
And we have Julie Price.
Hello.
And okay, so John is CEO and lead designer of DGS Games, which designs and markets the Free Blades fantasy skirmish game. He is also the published designer of Warrior Miniature Rules for Ancient and Medieval Warfare, 3000 BC to 1485 AD, and Starfleet battles the Vudar? Is that right?
Vudar, yep, that's right.
Okay, Vudar Enclave. John is the developer for the Lost Battalion Strategy and Tactics issue number 217. John has great experience in freelance playtesting and design work in over 50 published products for GMT, Decision Games, XTR, Battlefront, and Armadillo Design Bureau. He has some other credits too, but it was getting really long, so I had to cut it down a little bit. So John also has 20 years of experience as a U.S. Army military intelligence officer. Thank you, sir. Retiring with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. That's no small rank, folks. Since retirement from active service, John has been employed as the director of threat integration. I'm sorry, can't even read my own stuff. For the U.S. Army. Julie is CFO and sales director for DGS Games. Julie discovered the game Free Blades 2.5 years ago together with her son. They joined the local Free Blades League the following summer, and that is when her passion for the game really ignited. An analyst by occupation, she brings strong analytical and organizational skills to the DGS Games team. And let's not forget, DGS Games are the 2-year champions of Cleric Fighter Wizard Rogue miniature painting tourney for AetherCon, which is why we're proud to have them on this episode. So welcome to the show. It's a long intro, but you gave me your bios, so I read them so people know what to expect. I'm going to start with John because John seems to have the long. I was reading in your bio 40 years of gaming. 40 years. That means 1977 you got started. That's 3 years before me. So I mean, and that is in the early. I mean, that is in the baby days of gaming. That is right in the very beginning. So, were you one of the folks that did you go to college, or did somebody from college bring back this gaming experience, or how did you get involved?
How did I start? I mean,
yeah. I mean, because normally I don't ask that question. Normally I don't ask that question because like we all kind of got started the same way, but in those early days, it's generally a tiny bit different.
True. I think that's probably true. So when I was a little kid, we had these little model soldiers, right? Little plastic World War II, miniature figures, and we'd set them up and we'd throw dirt bombs at them and they'd all die. It always bothered me that we couldn't tell when we were done. Everybody's dead. We go inside. We have lemonade. So. How come we can't figure out who had the better setup, who put their machine gun in the better spot, whatever. And I came into a friend's house, and he had an older brother, and they had a copy of the old Avalon Hill game, France 1940, set up on the dining room table. And I'm really big into maps, and it was a map of Europe, map of France and the German border. And I'm like, what's this? And he's like, it's a game. And I said, what are these guys? And these are the Germans. What are these guys? These are French. And I said, can you figure out who wins? And he said, yes. And so I was sold, but I was 10, so I wasn't going to be understanding France 1940 at the age of 10. But my dad still got me a copy of one of those old board games. And I sort of messed around a little bit, but I was too young really to understand what was going on. And then when we moved to a new place, I met some friends that had actually puzzled out how to play one of these as a group. And so together we each sort of figured out how they went. And then not too long after that's when everything went crazy because D&D was invented,
Right.
And so we were already sort of gamers when this other way of playing games, hit the market. Some kind of an original white box kid, from back in the day when it was all new, So that's where I got my start.
Right. Yeah, I used to do. We'd take rubber bands. We'd set our army men up, and we'd take rubber bands and ping, enemy and shoot them. But yeah, like you
Right.
said, there was no real rules, and it didn't matter how good the army was. It was how good you could shoot a rubber band, you know.
Right.
So it was that was, you know, that's how we got started with it. And when I got older, I'm from, my family's from West Virginia, so we had property back in West Virginia, and I would go back there and I took some army men and we would shoot them with 22s, not at each other, you know. But and they made these really cool. I'll tell you, it's really neat. A 22 puts like little holes in the men. There's those green army men. And I took some of them and I painted them up. I actually took the shot miniatures and painted them because it leaves nice little streak marks, and you can paint them with red, and it really makes a gruesome scene.
I'm surprised they're not in the film industry after all that.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. True. So Julie, you reading through your bio and stuff, when you discovered the game Free Blades, was that your first like kind of this kind of gaming experience, or had you been doing gaming before that?
Really not much. Back in college, which was a long time ago, I
Right.
had played some RuneQuest, and almost over the death of my character for Matt.
Right.
But no, it had really, been a long time. I was looking for something that I could connect with my son on, and I heard about the game, and he's so much smarter than me. So I thought if I had a game where I could roll some dice, maybe I would have a chance. And
Right.
really thought it would just be about something I played with him now and then. But once I got into it, he went away to college, and I started showing up on game nights, and got into the league. Fell in love with my free band, especially my Forester, and it's been just great since then. I just love the game. Have a real passion for it, and I'm very fortunate that I'm a part of it now.
Oh, very cool, very cool. So, so John, you you got into gaming. You did a lot of gaming, and I see you got a lot of credits to your name. So, what was your first kind of design experience like? How did you cross over? What was it that got you to cross over and actually start making gaming material?
Yeah, my first real experience designing anything from scratch was with the old board game Starfleet Battles. You know, I was an original Star Trek fan, and the game is an old school text-based. You know, you have a cardboard counter for your Starship Enterprise or your Klingon D7 or whatever it is. And it had it was in the middle of when I first met it. It was in the middle of a big expansion. They were adding new races and new parts of the galaxy. And I met the designer at a convention, and we kind of became kindred spirits. I was heading into the military. He was former military, and he asked me to do some playtest work for him, and I ended up working with him on projects for, I don't know, another 15, 20 years probably altogether. And we're lifelong friends. And so he kind of, that's Steve Cole of Emerald Design Bureau. And he kind of brought me up, as a game design mentor. Still reminds me to this day what to do and not to do and what works and doesn't work.
Right.
Because he's seen it all. He's been in the industry forever. And so that was my first real, experience. And I got to do a couple for Starfleet, including the Voodoo, I got to do from scratch. The other races I worked on, part of it was already there, and I kind of took it over or advanced it. But with that particular race, it was all from zero.
Oh, okay, very cool. And I guess that that led you down the road of doing different things here and there, and got you into the like this Lost Battalion Strategic and Tactic issue number 217. What is that, a magazine? Is that like a gaming magazine?
Strategy and Tactics is a historical board game magazine. I grew up with it, and it has and I assume it's still published. I haven't worked with them in a while, but and it's changed hands a few times over the years. When it was first out, it was part of the company Simulations Publications Incorporated,
Okay.
SPI, and I
Oh,
did
yeah.
a lot of SPI board games.
Yeah.
And they would publish a game in every issue. And that particular issue is a game, The Lost Battalion, is about a unit that a friend of mine's grandfather was in, I want to say, a relative of his. And so he was very interested in the design of that particular game for that particular battle, and I helped him out on it. He and the owner of the magazine came to me for some design development work.
I was going to pull
That
out an
was a lot of
SPI
fun because he
book.
got to have his own. What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to pull out an SPI book, and it's not on my shelf. I think I packed it away, but I have an SPI game on my shelf here. Yeah. What's that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's very cool. So the I have one. I believe I have one somewhere too. You know.
Right.
So, and I've got a couple of plastic tubs out in the garage that are still in the way of
Right.
all our DGS material that are old SPI games. But he was involved in that project with the magazine, and you know, how cool for him to work on a battle that he had a connection to through his relatives, and you know, we've been friends for a long time, so I gave him a hand because I kind of knew the people involved and how those games are made.
Oh, awesome. So Julie, I noticed you were doing a lot of these tournaments. Did you go to conventions to do these tournaments? Were these like in a game store, or how did you wind up getting involved in the tournaments?
The original tournaments that I competed in were mostly local. Well, they were all local. So I don't know how many tourneys I actually competed in. I want to say maybe 4 or 5 before I became a member of the company. And
Okay.
of course, as a member of the company, I don't really compete in that way, but I help. We did put on our first ever tourney at a con this year at AetherCon, and that was last. So that was very exciting.
So how did you? So when you went into these tournaments, you started playing these games. I'm sure it was a little bit of a different world for you. You know, if you hadn't done one of these before. So the first time you went, you know, how was that? How did you feel when you walked in? You know, you walk in, and there's all these young people. I'm going to make a blank assumption. It's probably a lot of guys, but maybe not. Things have been changing lately. So I mean, well, it has. The industry's been changing, which is great. I mean, it's fantastic. It's just, you know, when I go to my local game store and I see a bunch of people playing games, it's almost always a bunch of guys. But how did you feel walking in there? Were you comfortable? Were you a little intimidated, or what'd you think?
Oh, you know, the Free Blades gaming community is just awesome. Everybody is so friendly, and there's nobody out there, you know, playing cutthroat gaming.
Right.
My very first game at a tourney, the guy I was playing against was so kind and helping me through because I was still kind of feeling my way through some of the rules, and he just was the nicest guy and helped me out as I maneuvered through everything. And I want to say that even at my first tourney, there were 3 women there. 3 out of, I want to say 10 or 12. So it wasn't just a bunch of guys. There were a couple of women there. And we're very proud of actually the participation that we have for women in our game, and we're proud of our new faction that's coming out that's all female. And so it's just for guys.
Good. Yeah. No. It's totally not. It's absolutely not. And I'm glad to hear that. It's sometimes, you know, it depends on your area and stuff. So like in my area, that seems to be the demographic. I don't know why, but it just seems to be. But that's good. That's good. And it was, you know, they were really friendly and welcome. That's fantastic. So
can I comment on that real quick before we go?
Absolutely, John. Go on. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So before Julie came on board, and her coming on board is a huge success story all in itself, but The company's philosophy has always been that because all the people still on board and all the original people that are involved in the project are longtime gamers, and in this case, longtime both miniature and role-playing gamers, that we do want to change, be active in the change of the demographic. Not, diversity across the board, not just female gamers, but gamers of all backgrounds and makeups and et cetera. And we tried to tackle the female gamer situation first, and we're going to continue to, expand our efforts in that area. But to make the models themselves sensible in terms of how a woman would look adventuring. We're not the chainmail bikini company.
I was going to say no chainmail bikinis.
There's places for that. We're not that place. We're not trying to judge what other people do. But for us, we wanted to create a space where somebody can identify with a character, and the character looked like they were going to go and do some adventuring, and what they were wearing and what they were carrying, and what their story was in the background, and what their role was sensible and accommodating and welcoming to a female gamer. And we've gotten very positive feedback, I would say. I think Julie might agree, but across the board in that area, and we're really, really proud of that. And like she says, we got an entire faction. A lot of our faction will be led by female models. We have a lot of female caster models, and across the design of the game, and now an entire faction that, because of their backstory, they are entirely female. And so the fact that our events are routinely attended by a percentage of female gamers that's higher than the demographic, especially in our branch. Card games, role-playing games, and now board games have all made significant advances in that demographics. And I think personally it's time for miniature games to step up and follow suit with our other parts of the industry. So,
yeah,
we're pretty pleased with all that.
Yeah, I was, and that's kind of where I was going with this. It's kind of the discussion I kind of wanted to get into, because I was looking at your the Kickstarter that you had or having. I'm sorry, is it coming, or is it already going?
Concluded in March.
Okay. And it was you had the Nemesis, the Secret Sister, and the Throat Seeker miniatures on your page here that I'm looking at, and they are really cool looking. So this is in the one land that you have here. You have a rebellious faction of women taking the power back. So tell me a little bit about that campaign. Where did the idea for that come about?
You want me to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Either one. That doesn't matter.
So, well, I mean, one of the things we're very proud of is that to a large degree, the composition and the design of the Eclipse Sisterhood is what they're called.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
we'll explain that in a minute. Are Julie's baby. What I didn't want to have is a woman faction designed by a man. I don't think that's the right way to go. I have some more design experience than she does, but it's really about let me handle the details of the mathematics. You tell me what you want the flow of the faction to be, and they play, and the kinds of roles they have, and we'll sweat the details of how that works mechanically later. There is a faction in the background called the Trazerite Empire. They are not evil technically, but they are misogynistic in that they kind of put women on a pedestal. They don't want them serving in the military. They don't want them holding political office, running a business. And so that doesn't sound evil, but it is evil, particularly if you're a woman.
Sure.
So, they're a little bit, so they don't, well, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that part later, but anyway, they are kind of the bad guys, or at least one of the bad guys of our background, not because they're like run by the Dark Lord, but because of the way that they, their society is. And so, and they worship a sun god, and so their symbology has a lot of sun motif in it. And so it had long been the plan that when we got to where we were in a good position, we could have their principal, and there are countries in the empire that rebel periodically from time to time. They have slave rebellions from time to time, but this group of people is the the principal antagonists, to the empire, and it's because they are tired of, they want to have the same rights as the men, and be able to participate in society. They're not disloyal to their country, their homeland. They want to participate in their homeland like anybody else. And there's a place for, a female gamer to come in and kind of, be a member of a faction that has those characteristics. And we think it's a lot of fun. We've got the Kickstarter was very, very successful for us, for our scale. We stretched well beyond where the original project was. And so we'll be releasing those models to the Kickstarter awardees in the fall, and then in December we'll release them commercially. So we're totally on track to deliver on time, and very pleased with the reaction it got across the board. It was a very, very popular
fantastic
thing amongst our gamers.
Cool. And Julie, what did you look like? You want to say something about your pet project there?
I was the trans rights were a little bit evil.
They did terrible things to women who
have
inadequate ability.
So they have a little bit of evil going on there. They enslave them and make them create, give them part of their life force to create magical items, and it's because they consider women with magical ability to be abomination. So they're a little bit evil. But yeah, I'm very, very excited about this faction. We are still hard play testing with them, but they are some seriously badass girls.
Cool.
They've got some great rules. So
it's going to be really exciting when they finally come out and get released in December. It's going to be exciting delivering to our Kickstarter awardees in November, and just so thrilled to be a part of this project.
Well, I got to tell you, the miniatures are beautiful. I mean, they really are. They're fantastic. So how did you all right. So I could see that, a big, I guess it seems to me that the biggest portion of DGS games is the miniatures, obviously, and skirmish fighting. What got you into miniatures? I mean, you're not, I don't see anything in here about being an artist who sculpts miniatures and such. Why, usually when people get, you got the tactical expertise, obviously. I mean, that's very clear. But how did you wind up getting into miniatures? I mean, how did that come about? I mean, I know you played with them, but man, how'd you get into having them made?
To getting them, you mean being part of the company?
Well, well, either person, either one of you can answer this.
Why don't I take that one?
I was thinking John, perhaps.
I mean, as far as how their miniatures, how we got into being, yeah. So let me just see if I can answer if I'm on the same thread you're kind of pulling on there. I was originally, when I was a kid, a board gamer and then role player when games like D&D came out, and then I don't have any classic artistic skills. I can't draw. I can't. I'm not a painter or a sculptor or any of those things. I'm very impressed by people who have that ability, and I love working with them, but it's not my skill set. So I have what very little painting skill I do have in terms of the miniatures I've acquired because of some very patient friends over many years. But I do like. I mostly left board gaming for miniatures because of the interaction with the creation. And I was reminded of that not too long ago. And I'm not trying to cast aspersions on any part of the industry. I play all kinds of games, board card, role playing, online, miniatures, doesn't matter. But my primary love and the love of the original crew that formed the company was miniatures because you identify with them. You put your effort into them, you build them, you paint them, and you kind of take some ownership over what you're playing with. And it was that, and kind of the way a well-designed game table with pretty painted miniatures looks visibly, the physical nature of that, I think is much more impressive. I was reminded of that the other day watching a couple of friends play an old school board game, and they were hunched over a table with a little tiny map, a little tiny square cardboard counters. And it's a great game, and it's a lot of fun, and I played it myself, but it's not the same, visual experience as a well laid out miniatures game. And so we got into that because we were, I was, and some other people were working freelance for another company, and we're just sitting around one day and said, hey, we're at a point in our lives where why don't we do our own thing? Why are we constantly, play testing someone else's game or writing articles or rules for somebody else's game? Let's make our own. And Free Blades was the ultimate, result of that. But in order to do it, because none of us are artists here, we have to partner with some really talented people. And you talk about how good the miniatures look. It's because the sculptors that we get to work with, and the concept artists we get to work with, and the painters that paint them for the the studio paints that we have, that all the photography is shot of, are just some incredibly talented people that we very much enjoy partnering with to do that. So that's part of the fun. Sure, I wish I was a sculptor, but I'm not. So, but I know some awesome people who are, and
yeah,
and they help.
I was just,
they do a really good job.
it was kind of interesting, because it's always interesting to me how people get into being, creators and creating the things that they create. And a lot of times it's just a natural extension. So this is what I do, and this is what I'm good at. So this is what I'm going to make. Stephen Perconi, who does Dwarven Forge, he's like a close friend of mine, but he's kind of a buddy of mine. He's a sculptor. He's a classically trained, went to art school and learned sculpting. And so this was like a natural, the Dwarven Forge was like just a natural outpouring of what he did. And I just noticed that miniatures are like a big part of your model. And it was just interesting. So it works. I mean, so you write the rules and you have artists, creative people, make your miniatures for you, which is fantastic. And they're killing it, man. It's a good job. These are some fantastic looking miniatures. So I guess the next question I have about this, the games that you make. So Skirmish is basically, there's no role playing elements to this. So nobody's actually playing a character, right? I mean, these are all like, just one time plays, or is there any kind of carryover? Because I'm not familiar with actually how your game runs. So
yeah, let me talk about that one too, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are one of the most role-playing skirmish games that you'll find out there by design. A lot of skirmish games, the scenarios are fundamentally military, meaning I have a military objective. I have my squad, my military style unit. I'm there to kill yours, or take some objective from you. In Free Blades, the free bands, they're called, are basically what you would recognize as a role-playing adventuring party. There's a leader, there's a caster, there's a rogue somewhere, there's a couple of fighters, and there's some followers that tag along. And the scenarios that we have in the skirmish game are, find the gold, close the witch gates, the demons don't come out, kill the monster that's terrorizing the countryside. And so that is deliberate, because we have a vision of a day where we are making a classic skirmish game, a cooperative skirmish game, which we just started working on, where all of the players are in the free band together. I don't know if you know the game Descent, Imperial Assault, Gloomhaven, these type games out there where you're playing basically a hybrid. It's not fully a role-playing game where you're doing interaction with NPCs, but you are adventuring as a team against either a game master or an application that's performing the functions of a game master.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Then also a classic tabletop role-playing game, which we have in playtest. And the idea being that your characters in your free band can move between the different game systems seamlessly. So you could be having this person you've identified with and you've associated with and built up over a long time from experience, being in a skirmish game one day, being a member of one of these cooperative free bands where you're all together operating against the game master, but still in mostly a skirmish miniature setting, but also moving in and out of being a character in a traditional tabletop role-playing game. And then the other way around. The game master working with our tabletop role-playing game could move into free blades to handle a large, encounter, a battle, between NPCs and characters, and then quickly convert the characters back into the more detailed role-playing character sheet, and then proceed with the rest of the adventure and interact with NPCs and play their roles as you'd expect in a game like that.
Right. Yeah.
Trying to build it. Go ahead, sir.
No, go ahead. Good. I was going to say, it takes me.
We're trying to build a system where you can go back and forth easily. Free Blades was the fundamental business decision was to start with Free Blades first. It's a low model count, so we get the miniatures out there, the core game mechanic gets out there, and then we can bring the other games online after when that process right now.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that reminds me of Mech Warrior in some ways. BattleTech and Mech Warrior. I think, if I remember correctly, God, it's been so long. I still remember that Mech Warrior was sort of like the role-playing aspect of BattleTech, so that you could play and you could have your mechs running around and killing each other, and then it's like, well, what do you do in between? Between smashing each other up. So that's really cool. So what do you?
You can already connect games of Free Blades, the skirmish game, in a campaign, and have the characters skill up in advance between encounters. So that's already a thing. In fact, it's very popular. The core league that's here in the greater Kansas City area has got 20 plus players in it. And one of the things that we're proud of there is that we don't have a lot of fall off in terms of players leaving the campaign before it's all played out, because we spend an awful lot of time on what we call a handicap system. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but a lot of these games that have campaigns, very shortly in, a player will possibly have some bad luck, or just, things don't go as well as maybe they want them to. And their score, their value of their team isn't as high as another player's. And so they feel like they've fallen behind and they can't catch up, and they move on to something else. We've developed a system that encourages a player to stay in it and gives them rewards for doing so that is seemingly very successful, because we don't have any real drop off, of course, an 8, 9, 10, 12 week campaign. In fact, the one that is running around here in the local area, this version ends with a big end of the campaign encounter it'll probably have 12 players in it, I think, next Tuesday. And so you can already do that. What Free Blades doesn't have, like you would expect a skirmish game doesn't have, it has everything about a role-playing game except the encounter with the NPC interaction, where the game master is playing the role of someone in the background and the player is playing the role of their character, and they're interacting in a non-combat sense. That's what our trad role-playing game will do. It does now. It's in play test. You can get it off the website and give it a try and give us feedback, but we're working towards that goal. And then, of course, with that, like I said earlier, the goal being able to be to move between them. But you can get almost all the essence of that right now by connecting your games using the campaign rules.
Okay. All right. So I got one for you. This is we try to keep the summer roundtable series kind of light and stuff. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you a couple questions about, just about you. So when you do something, when you have a release, you guys have been doing, like a big product, you're working your butts off on something, say, for example, a Kickstarter, because we know how crazy that is. If you've never run a Kickstarter, it's insane. It's like however long your Kickstarter is, it's that many days of insanity. And there's all the month leading up to it is insane. And then, then it happens, you're kind of like, oh, because then there's nothing you can do anyway, it's done. So if it's successful, you're like, yay. If it's not successful, what did I do wrong? And then you get to work, right? But there's always this sort of like, this drop off period where you're kind of just like, so what did you all do? Like, once your Kickstarter was done and you said it funded successfully, you're very happy with it. How do you celebrate? Do you guys go get ice cream? Do you go to the bar and have some drinks? Like, how was that? Julie, I'm gonna let you know what. John's been talking a lot. Julie
Julie definitely ought to be.
To AetherCon.
I was just about to say the same thing. I think Julie should answer but my memory is exactly the same thing. We concluded the Eclipse Kickstarter, and we drove to Chicago to go to AetherCon and worked our ass off.
What happened.
But I'll let her take this one for sure.
So, Julie, you guys, you finish this crazy Kickstarter roller coaster ride, and you go directly to work at con.
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh my God, you guys crazy?
Well, I would add that the Eclipse Kickstarter was our 6th consecutive successful Kickstarter, and our most successful one. But we delivered on time with all of the previous ones. And then how we basically used them to double the number of factions we would normally bring to the player. So at this point, we'd be about the 5 faction mode, and we're at the 10 faction mode because of our fans and what they've done for us with being Kickstarter awardees, which is a very big deal. So it basically doubles the speed that we would normally be at a company of this size. So really, I have to say, and I'll let Julie kind of give her take on it. But my view is, I understand that exactly what you're saying about Kickstarters because we've been through it so often. But really, this one was kind of old hat. We had done it so many times. We knew exactly what it was going to be like when it ended. We didn't know how successful we were going to be. We were wildly successful for what we were doing. We weren't one of these $1 million ones, but for what the scope of the project was, we were 225% funded.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Past the original project, doubled the original project. And so we were on a high and able to drive off to Chicago.
Feeling great.
Right? I mean, yeah. So now it didn't stop us from knowing, what had to get done when we got back, because it is work. You've got to take care of all your awardees. They're all precious, people, and they're gonna move, and they're gonna want to change what it is that they want to do. You want to take care of their investment in you, and so we're very conscientious about that. So we knew while we're hanging out at the Schaumburg and AetherCon's we go to Gen Con too, but AetherCon's our Gen Con. It's just because it's an all miniatures convention, it's an extremely big deal to us.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
And it's where we engage with most of our fans, and it's the place where we release the most models. We actually release more models at AetherCon than we traditionally do at Gen Con. So it was a very big deal. Our first away tournament this year was there. And we were on a high because we were engaged with the customers that had just been through supporting us in the Kickstarter, and we get to see them personally.
That's right.
What's your take on that?
Pretty much.
Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to steal your thunder. I'll shut up now, but
So Julie, when you go to the convention, what is your role? What do you do there when you're at the convention? What do you primarily do?
I am mainly the gal that hangs out in the booth, and I do a lot of booth demos. So I take people through a turn of the game and explain kind of how the game works at a fairly detailed level. I tell them about the core game mechanics and about the player's aids that are available, and show them how one turn works. And that's a lot of fun. Usually I'm not the person out on the floor running games. I'm interacting with the customers and doing the demos.
Well, that's actually super important because you are quite literally the first person a lot of these people see. You are the first exposure, to the game. Like somebody comes up and they go, "Hey, what's this free blades?" And Julie, you're on. Make it happen. I mean, that is a very important, important role to take. I mean, you could be the person that determines whether somebody buys that game or not, becomes a free blader or not.
That could be true. Yeah.
Like no pressure.
No pressure at all.
Yeah. Right. But we'd all rather have it be Julie than one of us. I mean, so of all the people for somebody to engage with versus the booth, if we had to pick the people that are currently in the company, I think we all, even if she hadn't fallen into it naturally, would pick Julie to be the one meeting the customer
Okay.
first anyway.
It's a lot of fun,
So,
though. It
Yeah,
really
that's
is,
cool.
sitting down and telling them about this awesome game.
Yeah. Yeah, I do a lot of conventions, and I'll tell you, they can be. I've never had a booth like so that my involvement. You know, I have a show called The Mythwits, and I do a lot of interviews and stuff, and I work with TSR Games, the new TSR Games that is, and so we do some stuff. Like we went to GaryCon and we did some coverage there. We interviewed people. We ran a couple live games, recorded them for our show Game School, and even just that, I mean, wipes me out sometimes because it's just so much. There's so many people. There's so many things going on. There's so much movement. There's so, you know, and you're just like at the end of every day, I'm just like, oh my God, you know. And then we like to hit the bar and start drinking, and you know, but there have been times where everybody wants to hang out. I'm just like, I can't. I gotta go back to the room. I'm wiped. I'm, you know, all day talking to people and scheduling stuff and having to deal with the stress of is this event going to go off? Can I, you know, I mean, you know, you're just on, and you're just like, oh, I'm on, and then, you know, when you shut down, it's like, whew. Like, do you guys feel that way? Like at the end of the day, are you just like, that's it? I need to soak my feet in hot water or whatever, you know. Do you need to, Calgon, take me away? You know?
Yeah, I guess a little
bit.
bit. I mean, a beer's always welcome at the end of the day.
And
you know, it's not like we go back and
start playing more games at the end of the day.
No.
Yeah, some you know, socializing, I think, right? I mean, and Julie and I, you know, we both suffer from have the benefit of, depending, that we don't sleep. So, you know, transitioning from the floor of the booth to, you know, the bar, the grill, or whatever the, you know, space has afterwards to sit around and talk or hang out with fans. I think we did used to have a killer schedule after hours, after the vendor hall hours, where we'd still put on games. We kind of backed off of that because it was burning about people out a little bit. So we'll do it on a voluntary basis. We schedule the games just for the daytime period now. And if somebody comes by and says, you know, I couldn't get to it today. I'd really liked it, but I had this other thing scheduled, you know, and we'll throw a game together in the open gaming area after the vendor hall closes. But typically, that's time to go decompress, you know, like you say, and, you know, have a beer and stuff. But I think we've been at it a while, so, you know, we've kind of learned some of those lessons. So the schedule's a little probably smarter than the first few times we did it, you know.
Yeah. So let me ask you, do you all think is it's my opinion that role playing games, because I've been working on, you know, because if you're an avid role player, you probably have a game that you've been working on. I have one that I've been developing for years, and I've made a bunch of, when I was younger, I made a bunch of you know, just like small games that I never did anything with other than play with my friends. But you know, I found that was a very difficult task. I mean, like it is all encompassing, versus say I made a couple card games and they were vastly easier to make. And then my friend Ben Gerber, who's he's another podcaster and game developer, he actually was making a role-playing game, and he released, I believe he released the one book, but then he transitioned into board games because he has a family, he has a bunch of kids, and he found that it was just too much. It was role-playing was too encompassing. He could actually put out a board game in a fairly short period of time, you know, with some work investment in it, but it wasn't like this just constant ongoing work. So what are your feelings on that? Is the miniature skirmish stuff, was that easier than a role-playing game, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Yeah. That when we started, actually, there was a big kind of decision-making process, what we're going to make first. And we really were talking about fantasy or science fiction. We chose fantasy. And then we went at some time prior to the actual release of the game, deciding whether we were going to be a role-playing company first or a miniatures game company first. And so I think we made the decision that we did based on what you just said. I heard something very familiar, and in what you were just saying. It is all encompassing, and by doing the skirmish game first and putting the role playing game into what seems like a perpetual playtest. I mean, it must seem like that to our fans now, but I mean, it's a playable game, but there's components to it that aren't all the way there yet. And what has happened over the past few years since we released is that the role playing game has become the wellspring of the skirmish game. There's these things going on as we're working on them in the role playing game, and we can bring pieces of them forward into the skirmish game, but we can't really release the role-playing game until they're all done. So, for the role-playing game, there's dozens and dozens of spells, but I only need 9 per faction to release a faction.
Right.
So when a player encounters the role-playing game, oh my gosh, look at how much more spells there are in fire magic or shadow magic or whatever the kind of magic is, because that kind of caster's whole catalog, and we only need a subset of it. We only need a subset of the weapons, of the creatures, of the the things that are in the role-playing game to produce any given faction. Someday, hopefully not in far too distant future, we're gonna put a cover on that role-playing game and publish that as well. And we're closer, now than we've ever been. But I think you're absolutely right. It is absolutely harder to do it well, to do it as well as you want to do it, because there's just so much more going on. There's so much more depth to it than a single faction in a skirmish game.
Yeah,
that's my take. And I think that drove us to the decision that we ultimately made.
Right. So Julie, how much do you put into the I mean, I know you do a lot of the you said you do a lot of the organization and analytical stuff. How much work do you put into the rules itself, like the hardcore, like skirmish rules or role playing rules and stuff? Do you have much contribution to that? Do you?
Sure. I mean, I am one of many playtesters
Okay.
in our community that I contribute in that way. And in fact, that's really kind of how I got into the company. They had been in existence for some time before I came along, and it was when I first got into the game, I'm intensely analytical.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through this rule book, tore it apart, and I am John daily, probably. Questions about this rule and that rule, and how does this work? And I think I have one errata to my name.
Well, the basic response was, "I'll teach you, I'll hire you." So we'll show you, Missy.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, whenever there's a new rule, I'm always scrutinizing and thinking about
Oh, good.
how it's going to play, and
I'm not artistic
anyway, and so the creative aspects I leave to people that are creative. But,
Okay.
when it comes to the rules, I'm right in there, and I'm making suggestions, critiquing, and giving my feedback.
Right. That's what I figured when I saw the word analytical. I'm like, oh, you must be driving some of this rule sets, because that they need an analytical person. You got your creative types who make it all pretty and do all the flavor, which is really important, right? But then at the same time, it's all got to work, and that's where
she doesn't give herself enough credit in that area. I would tell you that. So let me do it. She classically in our industry, there's a relationship between the designer and the developer, and I know you know this. And so the designer is the one having the visions. Oh my gosh, I want to put this thing in my game, and it's going to have this many spells on it, and this many chains, and this many swords and blades, and it's going to cast this many spells. And the developer comes on and says, "Wait a minute, in reality, really, we got to make it fit this part of the background. We've got to have it fit the scheme in terms of balance, and we've got to do these things." And her analytical skills are so superior that when she comes into that issue, she's kind of like bringing some reality, and I want to say bringing reality to a fantasy game because you know what
Right,
they'll
no, no.
make, but bring bring a taste of reality to, okay, now how does that really going to work, and how does that really play out on the table? How is that going to be perceived by a player? You know, because we're here for a positive play experience. Doesn't matter
Right.
what we think in terms of how cool it is. It's what, you know, our playership thinks. And she comes directly from that with no, you know, biases coming from, you know, working in the industry before. It's all very much, you know, she brings an open-minded, analytical look to what we do, and does not let us BS her. You know, the kids, oh, it's just that way because of reasons. Oh, no.
Right.
You're going to have to prove why it
Right.
needs to be that way. And that's a good thing. It's a very good thing. Keeps us on our toes. And I certainly, the rules for the Eclipse, the Sisterhood, the new faction coming out this fall are as good as they are because of her efforts. You know, that we couldn't have done it that way and that well without her. So,
Right. Yeah, I got to tell you, you know, authors can get away with that stuff. They can have, you know, if you're writing a story, a lot of times you can get away with having a character who has all this crazy stuff going on, and because you don't have to go into those reasons. You know, you guide the reader through the story, and the only part of the story that gets told is the part that you want to tell. But in a role-playing game, you have no control. Even like in a skirmish game, like you know, you have players, and you don't control what they do. They do what they want to do, and that's great. But you got to give them a rule set, a backbone to play off of, or else it's helter skelter, and no one, you know, people will come away with a sense of unfairness if you've designed something, designed something poorly, because if you design something poorly, then you're always going to have the, you know, well, I want to play the guy with I want to play the character with the 10 swords that runs around on the field, right? It's like, well, I'm going to play the dagger person, and the person with the 10 swords that runs around is crazy. It's just mopping the floor up with everybody, and then the other person, everyone else is kind of like, well, this is no fun. I don't like this, and then everybody wants to play the sword. Like, this game sucks. So it's important in a game. You can't get away with it. You can't phone it in, you know, because they will break it up. So that's good.
And that is one thing that we're really proud of in this game is we strive very, very hard to keep it balanced and to make it so that if you bought in with the Black Rose at the very beginning, the Black Rose Bandits, you can still play all of those models in the game. They're never going to be obsoleted. And you know, sometimes a player or a prospective player will come up to me and say, okay, so what faction would you play?
If you're going to win this game,
what faction would you play? I can't tell them.
Right.
It's all about, you know, what style of play you like, what faction you might choose. But there's no one faction that you can say, oh, that's the one to play because that's the one that's going to win.
That's good. That's fantastic. That's good game design right there. You know, that's hard to do.
Well, it's
all right.
It's a lot of years of getting burned by that, you know, is what it is. So, you know, there's some of that in there too.
Because they'll tell you, right?
Oh, they will. You know, it's what we say here. You know, a handful of us have 6 months or a year to put out what we're going to put out, and thousands of people have the rest of their lives to show us where we're wrong.
No, it's good.
So, right. So you've got to do everything you can do, and also recognize that there are no perfect game designers. We're going to make a mistake. It's not about never making a mistake. It's how you fix the mistake with respect to taking care of the players that are playing your game. You know, you don't make it their fault. You know, and you address it as quickly as you can with as an effective a fix as you can. You know, so you try to get all of that up front. You try to play test effectively. You try to address balance, and every once in a while, one gets away from you, and then you say, "Okay, that's on us, and we're gonna fix it in a way that doesn't make you want to sell all your models on eBay. It doesn't, you know." So we will typically fix a problem where if we've caused one with something that's a positive outcome for the person that has the model involved, the rule involved. You know, it'll get better, or you know, we won't go we try not to nerf anything. We try to make something else that you already own better to match it, and so it kind of evens out as a philosophy rather than, oh, I'm done. they made a mistake and it makes a thing I bought totally useless, and now I'm stuck with it and I want to just get rid of it. We want to make you continue to love it, so, or help you continue to love it, and we're going to do that by owning up to it and fixing it in a way that makes you want to stay with it. Makes you want to stay part of that faction, or keep that model, or continue to enjoy playing the game.
Okay, so when we're playing, say we're playing the game, and we have we have a table of people. How many figures are on the board? I mean, how many, because one of the things, so I bought into this Robotech thing, 2 years ago or whatever it was. And I got, because I'm an old Robotech fan, I was like, I got to have them. And I opened it up and I looked at it and I'm like, oh my God, what a mess putting these things together. Because all these little, pieces like this big, you got to put each missile together and you got to, oh my God, it's ridiculous. So I may build one set to just put on my shelf, and then I don't have the time to do all this. So how many minutes, if I buy into this game, and how many figures do I have to paint? What is my investment of work before I start playing?
So a starter box of models, which is a playable freehand, starts at 6 models. Most of them are 6 models. There's one faction that has 7 in the starter box, and that's balanced freehand and 150 gold. If you're playing against someone else, the most you can have on a table at a time is 18 models. A typical game is usually somewhere between 6 to 12.
Okay. All right. So it's totally doable for a guy like me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And
we did want to make it low model count, easy to get people into the game. So if you and your buddy wanted to get into the game, you want a couple of starter boxes, a rule book, our Free Blades Rules Companion, which is a digital product that you buy once and get all the updates for free. It's a $6 download from our web store. All of that runs you a little over $100, and that's to get 2 players into the game. So it's a relatively easy way to enter.
All right, fantastic. And then I'm assuming you can use, for props and stuff, you could use anything that you have currently. Let's say I had a bunch of miniature stuff that, I had painted up like chests and, or maybe even Dwarven Forge. Let's say I bought into Dwarven Forge and I spent, the $10,000 to get one of those sets, right? And I've got that. Could I use that with this game?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Fantasy appropriate. 28 millimeter. Our models are 32 millimeter, but 28 millimeter terrain works fine. My son and I played on vacation once, and we didn't have anything like that with us, so we used hiking poles to mark out our 4x4 playing area, and we had rocks and leaves designating the woods. That worked too.
Nice. Fantastic. Yeah. It's like the old days. I pick up a stick and I got a gun, right? Like cops and robbers. Yeah. I so one time I went on a camping trip and we were gonna role play some. We were camping, but we brought some for the evening when we're hanging out. We're gonna do a little bit of role playing. And I forgot to bring the dice. Now this was the old Wedge Star Wars game, so it was only 6-sided. That's all we needed. So we took aluminum foil and we smashed it into really tight squares and poked holes in it, and we made dice. So I still have one somewhere, and my buddy has the other one. We had 2, so we just had to keep rolling them. But yeah, the necessity is the mother of invention, right?
That's right.
Excellent. So before we go, because we're running up on time. Before we go, what do you got? What's coming? Because you said you got some stuff coming. What's coming out? Is that just is that the Eclipse? The Eclipse Sisterhood, or
the Eclipse Sisterhood is coming out in December, and we're going to be releasing 10 models at that time. So the 6 that are in the starter box, as well as stretches. And we actually already have one Eclipse model that's out there. The Night Whisper came out this March. She was sort of the prototype for the faction. And
okay.
So we'll have to start. We also have we're releasing Bard at Gen Con in a couple of weeks.
Nice.
So She's a nice little model that can be modeled a couple of different ways. Got a couple of different instruments. And then we have the Car Hunter coming out in October. We're going to be releasing him at AetherCon. So got a couple of cons coming up. We're going to be going out to Davenport, Iowa, Games Plus One, doing a Free Blades Retailer Game Day out there. This is a program that we just started this year where we go out and visit retailers and put on a full game day for them. Show people how to play the game, interact with people that are already playing out there. We've just had a ton of fun. Made a lot of friends doing these games. So we've got that one coming up. And then Las Vegas up in January now.
Right. And then the Shadow Demons next March with AetherCon.
Yep.
Right. So lots of stuff coming out there.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you guys for coming on the show. I have John Cleves and Julie Price of DGS Games. Make sure you go to www.dgsgames.com. You can find them on Facebook, DGS Games. There is a YouTube channel that you sent me, but I'm just going to put that in the show notes. That'll be down here in the links because it's a big long string of letters and numbers. And then and everybody make sure you check out AetherCon this November. You guys returning for AetherCon? You're gonna try and keep your title?
We need to get Jennifer some models for the painting competition. Sure.
Okay. Fantastic. All right. And then and make sure you check out this week, just right now, dropped John Ryer of Tritech Games interviewed John Compton of Paizo Games. And then, yeah, obviously check back November 10th to 12th is AetherCon. It'll be right here on the YouTube channel. We're going to be running all kinds of stuff. And if you want to check out anything that I do, if you like my interview style, I have a little show called The Mythwits. I interview people every week, game designers, scientists, artists, all types. Next week is Lou Agressa of he has a new book out. Oh crap, I can't think of it right now. But it's for the cyberpunk game. The oh crap, now I can't think of that either. Anyway, check out mythwits.com. And then and of course AetherCon, and absolutely go check out DGS Games. It looks really cool. I like it. Your miniatures are beautiful miniatures.
Thank you, sir.
So, all right, guys, thanks a lot, and good night, everybody.